Just a bit of a disclaimer, this is going to be a bit of a controversial video I think, but just remember this is only my opinion and you are completely entitled to your own. But I do hope you'll hear me out on how I feel about the Pokemon series as a longtime fan. It will always have a special place in my heart. The memories I've shared with friends over the years are almost countless. I'll never forget battling my pals in Pokemon Red and Blue with the good old-fashioned link cable. I'll never forget when my 3rd grade class figured out how to duplicate Pokemon in Gold and Silver and we all traded our Pokemon to each other. I'll never forget the congregation of fellow Pokemon nerds during recess in 5th grade, where we traded and helped each other track down the legendary Golems as well as Latios and Latias. And as we grew older, I'll never forget our foray into standardized competitive Pokemon battling in Generation 4, which was made possible by the introduction of online play. This is a franchise that I've grown up with for 20 years now, and at no point did I ever jump off the Pokemon train. I'll always support the series, but it's impossible for me to deny that the main series games have become really stagnant, formulaic, and predictable at this point, and this needs to change. Having said all that, it is hard for me to criticize a series that I'm so fond of, but I do have my fair share of issues with how it's been handled over the years. Pokemon games have incrementally been improved upon in terms of gameplay features and mechanics. The largest leaps in improving the series took place in Generations 2 and 3. Pokemon Gold and Silver featured breeding, shiny Pokemon, new Pokemon types, held items, berries, the day-night cycle, and even included the Kanto region for players to revisit. Ruby and Sapphire introduced abilities, natures, Pokemon contests, secret bases, double battles, weather effects, diving, and the list just goes on and on. Future generations, in my opinion, have failed to expand the series in meaningful ways that these two generations did. Let's really think about this for a minute. What other substantial features were added over the years? Generation 4 added online battling and trading, but that's about it. And then Generation 5? Honestly, I can't think of a single noteworthy thing that it brought to the table. I've looked over a list of its features just to kind of give myself a refresher, and honestly, none of them are that compelling or remarkable. And I remember thinking this back then too when I first played these games. I wasn't a huge fan of these installments at the time, and I'm still not today. It's kind of a low point in the series for me as far as creativity goes. It wasn't until Generation 6 that Pokemon started shaking things up a bit again. Gen 6 added true 3D Pokemon battles, which fans have been waiting for a very long time, Mega Evolutions, Pokemon and Me, trainer customization, and finally, the addition of a new Pokemon type with the Fairy types. And then Generation 7 added the Island Challenge progression structure, which was cool, Totem Pokemon battles, which were challenging and really awesome in my opinion, Alolan forms, and Z-moves. Generation 6 and 7 took small measures to move the series forward, but as a player that has been here since the very beginning, these additions ultimately amount to very little for me personally. Despite all of this, these games just kind of feel like more of the same, par for the course. Speaking of more of the same, newer Pokemon generations have literally rehashed Ruby and Sapphire's plot structure over and over again. You always start off in a small town, you're given a starter Pokemon, you're introduced to your increasingly uninteresting rival character, you meet the game's professor, and then you're eventually swooped into a story involving an evil criminal organization whose objectives have become increasingly moronic in recent years, and then there's typically some nefarious leader that wants to control or destroy the world. And of course, at some point, the legendary Pokemon in the box of the game will eventually play a role in the story. Lather, rinse, repeat. It's gotten really old, hasn't it? I've always asked myself, why does it always have to be this way? I do appreciate some of the darker plot points being introduced in recent generations, like Lusamine and Lysander and Ghetsis. Those are all pretty messed up people to exist within the Pokemon world, and I do appreciate the handful of plot twists that the newer games have been giving us, but overall, the plots follow a basic cookie-cutter progression that has more than stayed its welcome. These formulaic plot lines almost make me appreciate Pokemon Coliseum for the GameCube a bit more. The game isn't a hallmark of storytelling and has plenty of issues, don't get me wrong, but you do have to appreciate the attempt at something different. You're some dude that already has trusted companion Pokemon, breaks into a criminal hideout to steal a machine capable of literally thieving Pokemon from trainers, and you eventually get wrapped up in stealing Pokemon that have had their hearts corrupted by an organization to carry out evil acts. Your ultimate goal is to capture these Pokemon from trainers and purify their hearts. Like I said, the game has plenty of flaws, and yes, it uses the whole evil organization thing as a plot device, but doesn't this make for a pretty interesting and refreshing premise compared to typical Pokemon fare? I would be happy to see a Pokemon game buck the established formulaic structure. The Island Trials in Gen 7 were a great start to this unconventional thinking, but I want them to take that even further. So what can Game Freak do to satisfy Pokemon fans looking for something different? I guess what I'm ultimately getting at here is, the series really needs to evolve. Game Freak cannot keep repackaging what is basically the same game every 3 years with some new Pokemon, a new region, new characters, and then expect all of its fans to be equally excited. Sadly, being that Pokemon still maintains great success, even having played it safe over and over again since Generation 4, I think we can expect more of the same from them in the future as far as the main series is concerned. Game Freak is a business, first and foremost. They have a business model that is comprised of their video games, their trading cards, and their television show, and the constant additions of new Pokemon and new regions are at the core of how they conduct their business. I cannot see them ever deviating very far from the established formula that they have in place. Not to mention that Pokemon gathers new fans every single year as children are exposed to the franchise. Pokemon fans that haven't been around since it started in the 90s like myself obviously won't have the same jaded perspective, and what newer fans may perceive as exciting, some older fans like me might find to be kind of lackluster. Perhaps the Pokemon game I'm looking forward to will instead be a spin-off title, a title that is willing to take risks and try something new without interfering with the established main series games. The series is no stranger to spin-offs after all. People are just begging for new ways to interact with the Pokemon brand. Just look at 2016's Pokemon Go craze. While the game was ultimately disappointing and failed to live up to expectations, the idea of experiencing Pokemon in a whole new way was clearly something that resonated with people. This game, as primitive as it was, reinvigorated the passion within me to go out and catch them all. I got Pokemon fever so badly I even went back and watched the entire first season of the Pokemon TV show, which is something I haven't seen since the 90s. So you're probably wondering what I think they could do to bring Pokemon to us in a new way. The first thing that comes to mind for me is a true massively multiplayer online experience for Pokemon. Imagine a game that makes the Pokemon world feel as large and expansive as it did in the original anime that many of us grew up with, where traveling around took a lot of time and where the world itself wasn't always so kind. Ideally, to separate this game's identity from the main series, I really think it would be awesome to allow you to control your Pokemon in a completely 3D environment, creating battles where you have to aim some of your abilities, move around freely, and think on your feet. Imagine bringing with you a party of 6 Pokemon that you can fully control and switch between on a whim. Imagine if they did something crazy like allow you and a group of trainers to raid Team Rocket's base in the Sylph Tower as a big group, with Giovanni and Armored Mewtwo waiting for you at the top or something. The possibilities are just endless and I love thinking about it so much. Pokemon has always been enriched by the social aspects of these games, like with battling and trading, and this would allow Game Freak to take player interaction to a whole new level. I have written about my ideas for a Pokemon MMO extensively, and if you would like me to share them with you in another video, just let me know down in the comments and I'd be happy to do that. That being said, MMOs are extremely costly to produce, they take a long time to create, and they require a lot of continued development post-launch, so I don't know, I don't ever see it happening, but man, that would really excite me. We've yet to see Nintendo tackle the genre at all, and I cannot think of a better IP than Pokemon to take it on. The free-moving gameplay style that I described above could just as easily be applied to a single-player experience too. The larger scale of recent Nintendo games like Breath of the Wild has me hopeful that we will someday have the privilege of exploring a vast Pokemon world akin to Breath of the Wild's Hyrule, even as a single-player experience. I'd love to see the scope of the series greatly expanded. I want the world of Pokemon to be fully realized. I want to see Pokemon in the wild right there in front of me instead of having to walk around in tall grass. I want a familiar but fresh approach to Pokemon battling. Departures of this magnitude will certainly require the creative liberty of a spin-off, as many fans would be outraged if the mainline games ever did away with the strategic turn-based battle system. And more specifically, you're probably wondering, what do I ultimately think of the announced mainline Pokemon game on Nintendo Switch? As I said before, if the past has taught us anything, it's that we should probably expect more of the same. A new region, new Pokemon, and a story that revolves around a villainous team and a legendary Pokemon. That may sound pessimistic, but hear me out on my hopeful side a bit too here. This is the first mainline Pokemon game to appear on a Nintendo console rather than a dedicated handheld device. It will allow Game Freak to experiment with a certain level of graphical fidelity that was previously impossible. They have always been confined by weaker handheld hardware, and thus the scope of the games have always been limited. This console is essentially a new canvas for them, with the potential to take the series to new heights. My prediction? More of the same in terms of mechanics and plot, but with the potential to create a more expansive region that allows us to traverse a larger world in new ways. Perhaps for the first time in the series, players will actually be given full control of the camera rather than having it at a fixed bird's eye view. This kind of visual perspective will make traveling the overworld so much more immersive and enjoyable, and honestly, I will be really disappointed if they don't take advantage of the Switch in this regard. Personally, for me to be really excited for the upcoming Pokemon game on Nintendo Switch, it's going to require them to move the series forward substantially. There needs to be a departure from the tired formula in many series traditions. Expand the world, give players the ability to move freely in 3D space with camera control, create a plot and premise that's new to the Pokemon series, start the game in a different way, kinda like Pokemon Coliseum, let us customize our trainers even further, and present us with interesting concepts and additions that make this game stand out from the others. The kind of creativity that was put into the legendary Golem hunt in Ruby and Sapphire is what I really would like to see moving forward. Experiences that are memorable and unique. What we don't need more of is more of the same. I want Pokemon to feel like an adventure again into the unknown, where new experiences await those of us who have been here since the start.